I am a part of all that I have met. Though much is taken, much abides. That which we are, we are. One equal temper of heroic heart. Strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. I don't know what it was. Goodreads, one of those little free libraries where they just give everything away. This corner of BookTube may have been compromised. Certainly the TBR is. Right now, my best agents are in the field. They will deliver the package. But if you, like me, and the Ulysses of Tennyson have the heroic heart, stay tuned, watch carefully, and discover your mission and mine. The Spy TBR of 2025. The books that came in from the cold. Harlequin managed the drop, but I fear they're on to him. He'll be through customs now, and they'll be looking for this. Wait. This wasn't supposed to be in the package. Four jacks. They're on to him and the whole bloody network. The network's blown, the safe houses, even this place. This must not fall into the hands of the opposition. I'll have to rendezvous with Firebird. Join me. I congratulate you on a match well won. Welcome back. I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur, and I hope that you enjoyed my interlude of the agents in the field. These are the books that came in from the cold, inspired, of course, by the great Spy Who Came In From the Cold, the seminal John le Carré novel, one of the greatest spy novels, one I've read multiple times, loved every time. But every 6 or 7 years, I go through this burst where I just want to read spy fiction, not crime fiction specifically, but like spy fiction. And I think this current burst has been brought on by the fact that my wife and I were watching the Day of the Jackal series that debuted about a month ago and enjoying it. It's a book that I read something about 25 years ago for the first time. This is an old copy from the 1970s. This was my dad's copy. He gave it to me when I was 12 or 13 and I read it and loved it. I had seen the film, the 1973 adaptation, and I think that was around when he had picked this up. He was probably about 15 at the time and had picked this up and read the book, loved it, gave it to me some years later. I loved it. And so this is one I've read a couple of times and really enjoyed. And so I started thinking about like, what would be some fun spy fiction to read or reread, and then share that. See if there are other fans of this out here who would want to discuss any of these. And I've kind of tried to break it into a couple of groups. So I've tried to break it into some books that I might reread, Day of the Jackal being first and foremost among those. But also a group of books that are books I've never read from authors that I have read. So rereads, books that are new to me, but the author is someone I know, I enjoy. And then a group of books from writers I've never read anything from, and see, what new fiction is out there to discover. So without further ado, the first group are the rereads, and I'll lead off with The Day of the Jackal by Frederick Forsyth. This is a book about an unnamed assassin, the Jackal, who contracts to attempt to assassinate Charles de Gaulle in the early 1960s in France. We know in reality that this assassination never occurred. It's written about 8 years after John F. Kennedy had been assassinated. In the aftermath, Martin Luther King, Robert F. Kennedy, numerous other assassinations had occurred. But this is just an incredibly detailed, procedural, technical book it's just a marvel. Knowing the ending, but still being entranced through the final chapters is fantastic. So I will be rereading this probably this month in January. Up next, one of my all-time favorites, a book I've read at least twice in full, and that would be Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy by John le Carré. This kicks off the Carla trilogy. It's been adapted as a television series with Alec Guinness as George Smiley. It was adapted a little over 10 years ago as a film. It's just a quintessential spy novel, and one that I think gets at the idea that there's as much paperwork and bureaucratic machination that can be going on and is tense as the knock off your socks violence that we think of. Building on that is then one of my favorites, a book I reread I think right before I started making videos on BookTube, and that's The Tears of Autumn by Charles McCarry. I will reread this probably later in the year, probably November, because this deals specifically with the JFK assassination and this theory behind it. It was published, first published in 1974, so about 10 years after the assassination occurred. It presents a theory that is not necessarily a theory I would subscribe to, but it's presented in a very compelling way. And some of the writing in here, McCarry just nails it right on the head. Some of the attitudes people have, the arrogance that even in 1974 had begun to be exposed worldwide, globally, from the U.S., but from other nations as well. So this is a fantastic book, and it's not the first Paul Christopher novel, but it's one of the earliest ones that, and it's one that if you enjoy this, there's plenty more to it. So I'll reread this one. And then finally, this is a possibility. I might switch this out for The Secret Agent by Joseph Conrad. I haven't decided yet. But Moonraker by Ian Fleming. I reread Casino Royale last month in December, and there were elements of it that I enjoyed. I think it was the third time I had read Casino Royale. And I have not read Moonraker for a long time. I think the last time I read Moonraker was 1999. So again, it's been about 25 years. But I remember at the time thinking this is totally different from the movie in every way that's good, and really finding this much darker and more interesting, more compelling than the film adaptation from the 70s. That there's some names stay the same, but almost nothing else does. So this would be one, a potential one. Now for four that I've read, books by these various writers, and I've enjoyed them. So I'm looking forward to continuing. Up first will be Spy Hook by Len Deighton. I don't know that anybody wants to join me when I read this one, but I finished London Match, and the first closing book in the trilogy of trilogies, the Bernard Sampson trilogies, and this was very good. It did a nice wrap-up closure to the Game Set Match trilogy. Really enjoyed it. And so I'm looking forward to continuing that story with Spy Hook. This is Deighton is his characters are very sort of intentionally almost like working class spies. They're spies who maybe didn't go to college or didn't grow up super wealthy, and so there's a chip on their shoulder. These aren't necessarily gentlemen, and so there's something uneasy that they feel in their work, and that comes across in a really interesting way. And so I'm curious to see how that trilogy develops, and in part because I thought that the way that various characters had sort of been delineated in Burlingame and Mexico set really flourished and came to full fruition in London Match in very good and interesting ways. So I want to see how he continues to develop those. Another one, this might be one folks want to join me for, is Jack of Spies by David Downing. This is a sort of World War I era spy novel. I think sometimes some of the early spy novels that were written at the turn of the century or in the first 20, 25 years of the century, sometimes I feel like those show their age. The writing styles are so Edwardian that the books feel trapped in there. The Secret Agent is maybe one of the few that seems to spring out of that. But the John Buchan books, even the Riddle of the Sands, I feel like they're trapped in that era in a way that sort of the seams show very clearly. But I think that period is ripe for just absolutely interesting stories and narratives. And David Downing's Station series, Zoo Station, Silesian Station, Stettin Station, Potsdam, Later, Maastricht, those are in the 1930s and World War II. This is for an earlier series. This is the lead-off novel. So I'll probably read this in March if anybody wants to join and maybe talk about this one if you've never read David Downing. It's very good. And then Alan Furst. So I've done one or two Alan Furst videos on the channel, but not for a couple of years. And one of his books that I've never read and that I'm eager to read is Blood of Victory. Furst books are set in the 1930s, 1940s, and they're almost like travel writing wrapped up within spy narratives. They're really sharply drawn. There's a sense of feel for the place, the time, the food, the music, the clothing. All of that comes through, and then the plots just sort of explode in a way that is very contrary to someone like John le Carré or some of the others, where these are filled with action, but we also have people who have to travel and things like that. So Blood of Victory is one that I'll be looking forward to reading again, probably sometime this spring. I'll try to put in sort of an itinerary in the description box. And then the longest of the books that I plan to read this year, one I sort of started to see if I was enjoying it. I found it for like $2 and thought, I'm enjoying this. I'm gonna read it. But it's also, if I recall, almost 1,300 pages, and that's Harlot's Ghost by Norman Mailer. And this is sort of like a long, expansive, decade-long odyssey within the US CIA and all of the horrors that it was involved in. But what I was getting in the first 150 pages was this simultaneous fascination with these characters and with the CIA, and also this deep revulsion and antipathy for it. And that tension that was very baroque and effective, I think. Mailer's at his best when he's not viewing himself, but is venting himself, but is not viewing himself, in my opinion. So I'm looking forward to reading Harlot's Ghost. If anybody wants to join me for that might be one that I read over the summer or something. And then finally, the 4 books from writers I've never read anything by. I've wanted to read something by them in the past, or I've just learned about them in the past year, and I thought this year I'd give them a shot. So the first one is Robert Littell. I've had the company for 15 years probably. Never been able to read the whole thing. It's 900 pages, and I thought maybe start with something different. So I grabbed one of his earliest books, The Defection of A.J. Lewinter, from 1973, I believe. Interested to read, curious to read this. I'll probably be reading this in January, kind of alongside The Day of the Jackal. See what I make of early Littell. See if this is someone I want to read the company and read, more of his works. I know my wife has talked about, I think it was The Amateur was one she was talking about possibly reading. So Robert Littell. Another one, a book I've heard of many times, ironically because of the television series, which I've also never seen, but I know the the theme song. I know the theme song because it was in a scene in Patriot Games, and that's Harry's Game by Gerald Seymour, set during, I believe, the Troubles in Ireland. I think it was written in 1970, published in 1975. I'm curious to read this. I think this might be one my wife and I read together this year. But I don't know, if you're a fan of Seymour's writing or of Harry's Game, let me know. Like I said, I don't know what to expect. I've intentionally tried to not read too much about any of these. The next one is a writer I just learned about in the past year. Never heard of him, but I thought I'd give him a shot, and that's Anthony Price, or Antony Price, I suppose, if with the British pronunciation. And I thought I would just read his first Audley and Butler book, The Labyrinth Makers. My understanding is there's sort of spy narratives, but also historical background information sometimes, that there's some historical mystery that's also being solved, which that could be right up my alley. I might really enjoy Anthony Price. This might become one of my favorite writers. So I'm eager to read this book and see what I make of it. And then finally, another writer I just learned about in the past year, and I think this will pair really well with Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, and that's A Spy in Winter by Michael Hastings. And I'd come across Hastings' name because I was looking at I think a Joseph Hone book, if anybody's a fan of Hone. And it had a list of other books that were published, and Hastings' name was on there. And then when I was looking at the available novels at a used bookstore in December, I saw this title, and this seems to be about an agent who helped craft the Cambridge 5 spy ring that Philby was part of, and that was a direct inspiration for Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. So this one I'm really excited for. I actually got a second copy of this. This is a book my wife and I are going to read together over the next year. I'm not sure when, but this might be early. This might be sort of February or April or something, but probably in the first half of this year I'll be reading A Spy in Winter. So I'm looking forward to reading this. So again, I'll put all the titles and authors in the description box. Let me know. Let me know if you're a big fan of any of these, or if there's other titles by any of these writers you recommend. I'd love to hear it, and hopefully you'll be seeing some videos on these throughout 2025. And hope everyone's doing well. Thank you.